When you put chicken in the oven and it gradually transforms in color from pink to a golden brown hue, a complex cooking process is taking place, accompanied by glycation. It is glycation that is responsible for this process. From the moment a person is born, they begin to cook from the inside through the process of glycation. When you are fully cooked, death eventually occurs. Glycation happens, and you slowly begin to brown from the inside, much like a roasting chicken in the oven. For example, if you look at a baby's cartilage, it is perfectly white. In a person who has lived for a full century, the cartilage gradually begins to turn a brownish color because of glycation. Glycation and glucose actually sound quite similar to one another, because it is glucose that causes glycation. The lower the glucose level, the significantly lower the overall level of glycation. The more glucose you have in your body, and the more often your glucose levels spike, the faster you cook, that is, undergo glycation, and the more rapidly your body begins to age. Glycation shows up on your skin as deep wrinkles, and it also progressively ages your internal organs.
Look, let me say this again. I am certainly not a professional nutritionist. I have absolutely nothing to do with the field of nutrition science, and I am not even a certified diet specialist. You see, in order for you to truly understand and grasp, for example, something complex about the world of chemistry, you really have to be a trained chemist yourself to get it right. To understand something about physics, you have to be a physicist, because otherwise you just won't get it. You receive a certain package of information,
You really
won't be able to unpack it. It's the same thing here. I feel, again, I'm not a biologist. I really don't know how all this works. I feel like there's a bit of a stretch here, but there is a certain grain of truth in it. Because look, overall, sugar isn't really that great. It's not a healthy thing. I mean, no matter how many times I've looked into sugars, especially these synthetic sugars, actually the higher self is very liberal and open. It has a very calm and steady attitude towards many different things. But sugar, not so much. Sugar really isn't all that natural, and it's not a particularly pleasant or healthy thing. In this sense, sugar definitely has a bit of an effect on aging. That's true. But overall, when it comes to health, that's it. Overall for health, and its effect isn't very positive. And in fact, anything that doesn't have a very positive effect brings old age closer. That is what I can say here without being a professional biologist, a nutritionist, or anything like that. But the way she explains it, it's kind of superficial and a bit shallow, not very deep. My final verdict on this really is, overall, it's correct, but there are a lot of different additions, exceptions, complexities, and other things that simply weren't mentioned here.
listen, well, if they're not saying yet that even overeating leads to death, yes, eventually. So you can't really say that if someone has some kind of dependence on sweets, some real craving, that it's like a self-destruct program.
Yes, if we look at it psychosomatically, this topic is closer to me. If you look at sugar addiction from a psychosomatic perspective, you'll see that any addiction, including sugar, is always a form of sublimation, of something. That is, a person who is drawn to sweets, yes, and feels a really strong craving. They are either mentally exhausted because, as they say, a quick release of these simple carbohydrates really, as they say, gives the human mind a temporary boost. But it's not quite the right kind of healthy boost. It's like, you know, like beating a tired old horse with a heavy stick as hard as you possibly can. Poor horse. Of course, it will run faster for a moment, but as they say, at what ultimate cost will that speed be achieved? It is simply not a sustainable way to function. The Snickers company, by the way, has this whole theme that if you're tired, you eat one and you feel more energetic. Actually, it is not just about Snickers, it is actually the entire Mars Corporation. In this sense, yes, I suppose it does work, but still, in my own honest and personal opinion, just my personal view, it works a bit like relentlessly spurring on a very tired and weary horse. If we do not take into consideration that specific situation where you are just completely exhausted and trying to struggle to make it through the day on these carbs somehow, most often it is simply, yes, it is deeply rooted in a fundamental lack of love. Imagine a person who, you know, seems like they're not even tired. They've just had a good meal, but still they want something sweet. They want even more, and then even more. Of course, it could also be just worms. But still, most often, if we don't consider worms, there is another reason. And it's especially those people who engage in intense mental activity, who need to somehow find ways to physically activate themselves a little. For example, if I have been talking a lot, or I'm filming, or I'm writing something, or doing something else, sometimes after that I reach for a small sugary snack if I know I need to keep working afterwards. But actually, that's not the right approach. Most often, if you just crave something sweet, even though it seems like you don't have any parasites and you're not tired, this is already, and in fact, this is the case in about 90% of all situations involving sweets. It's actually a kind of lack of love, a desire for a little more of that pleasant, harmonious feeling.
Danila, and in general, this deep desire to preserve one's youth and prolong that feeling of youthfulness. From the perspective of the higher self, is that truly appropriate or not? After all, we know that aging is a natural process. And when a person resists it, isn't that, well, something negative in a way?
From the standpoint of the true self, any resistance to anything at all, it's not a very positive thing. When you resist something, it means that you are not accepting something. And if you are not accepting something, and since everything is one, and one is everything is, a part of God and so on, well, certain questions arise from that. But if you genuinely enjoy the feeling of it, that is, if you are playing, and this is a crucial and incredibly significant distinction to keep in mind, if you are playing this game of youth, where you just want to be younger, but at the same time, you are completely and utterly at peace with the natural and inevitable process of growing older.
It wasn't driven by fear, but out of a genuine sense of creativity and curiosity.
Yes, more out of a certain curiosity. Then there is nothing wrong with that. I'll go even further. In fact, there are plenty of techniques for prolonging your youth. One of them is connecting with your higher self, as strange as that may sound.
Well, yes, because there you feel the light.
Yes, you feel the light, you feel high energies and vibrations. You just completely stop worrying, you stop struggling, and you stop yourself from feeling so incredibly anxious. I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, do you ever actually remember seeing me in a bad mood?
No, never, not at all, ever.
Not even for a moment. Never. I just don't have it. I don't have it, not even in my everyday life. It's not just for the camera. I'm always this cheerful. I just don't have a bad mood in general. Well, I always feel this light. I always feel this harmony. I always feel this love. I recently wrote a post about how, in terms of vibrations, our planet is moving upward. Some people wrote to me like, upward? Where to? Are you currently living there in your Indonesia or in your Moscow? So you need to be taken to the front lines, thrown in there, right? And then we'll see how you sing a different tune. And I have a student of mine, just for the record, okay? She lived in Avdiivka for 2 years. For those who even remotely follow the news, you know perfectly well what happened there. Basically, she just lived in a basement for 2 years. In the literal sense of the word. She lived in a basement, and not even alone, but with her whole family, under bombardment. So it wasn't just the front, it was the front line. That's what they call zero, like they say, to send someone to zero. They lived at zero for 2 years. Here's what she writes. I just want to read this out on purpose. I don't think she'll mind, because she wrote it, well, basically in my class, so that everyone could see. I live in Avdiivka and I have seen war. All this horror, and yet at the same time I always felt happy. What is in your soul is what you feel. During brief moments of silence, I would come out of the basement and tend to the flower beds in front of our 5-story building and plant things. There, flowers, and I would craft decorative paths and borders in the flower garden from the rubble of the house. I picked shards of glass out of the flower beds and collected rainwater for my needs and for the flowers as well. I wasn't suffering, I was rejoicing in life and beauty, and you can always and everywhere see the beautiful and feel love. That's a level, truly, that's a level. That is the kind of individual who, in general, has fundamentally comprehended the entire situation. By the way, she wrote this even before she came to see me. She's just strong. She's simply strong. She has the strongest connection with spirit, a strong overall energy field, and strong extrasensory abilities. And I can truly say that maintaining a deep connection with the spirit is an incredibly life-changing experience. Living on consistently elevated levels of high energies and vibrations, it allows you, among many other things, to experience things exactly like this and to remain, so to speak, feeling much more youthful and vibrant. Again, youth is always an internal state of mind and spirit. No young person will tell you that inside they feel like an old man. bitterly grumbling about everything, or slowly walking around with a cane. No, all young people are young on the inside too. They have a good mood, they feel love. And overall, they're energetic, active, and so on. Maybe my photo will appear somewhere here on the screen. This is me without a beard, without glasses, and well, without a beard. Actually, yes, it was taken about a year ago. Right now, basically, I look exactly like I do in that photo if I were to go ahead and shave off the beard. But that's exactly the reason why I don't ever shave it off. I interact with people who aren't their higher selves, but who still perceive everything with their minds. And if I were to appear exactly like that, I think that the vast majority of people...
You are truly still good no matter what, Danila.
Well, yeah, but I look really young there.
Well, you look younger.
Very young, yeah.
You're younger.
Yeah, and there's no Photoshop at all. I swear to you, as they say, cross my heart. How do you do the cross properly? I didn't Photoshop it. If you want, if you really want, even if not in terms of appearance, at least to feel inside yourself more energetic, more cheerful, healthier. Contact with the higher self is simply the perfect method, the most ideal way to achieve this. In January of this year, on the 25th, we held a club meeting in Moscow. These are absolutely free meetings for people who have completed the training. I looked at all of them. You know, listen, at that club meeting, it was mostly the guys who came. They were just like that, really radiant. They actually appear much younger now than before they first began their training program. They really do look a lot brighter. This light really makes you look younger. So guys, if you want to reconnect with your own youth, please, as they say, you are welcome. The discounted group is in July, and I'll be waiting for everyone there.
I also wanted to ask a very relevant question about implants. Right now, Ozempic is very popular, the one people use for weight loss. They inject it to effectively balance and neutralize blood glucose, or for specific types of medical surgeries. Is this harmonious from the perspective of one's own higher self? Or just like in the previous question, would you say that if there's a sense of lighthearted playfulness in it, then yes? But if it's really about seriousness and a deep-seated fear of aging, then no?
Exactly. That is exactly right. If you really feel that intense fear, if you are literally running away from it, then that is no longer harmony. When a person is running away from something, quite literally, they are desperately escaping. For example, let's say someone lived somewhere for a while, and then they moved to another place. Not because he simply wanted to, but because he ran away from that place, or ran from one relationship into another. There's a very high chance that he'll repeat the same story again. If you're trying to escape, for instance, from your parents to your husband, or from one husband to another, or if you're running away from Moscow to the Moscow region, the truth of the matter is, you're always running away. If you are fleeing from Russia to a different country, or perhaps from another nation back to Russia, it always results in, well, stories that are not very good. For example, if you're running away from old age.
I'm just saying this because, as I understand it, this applies to anyone, no matter what we're talking about, any action. It depends on what you put into it. If you put fear into it, that's not harmonious. If you put in some playfulness, some lightness, then there is a true harmony in that.
Exactly. And if you're not just running away from old age, but truly living and enjoying life, and you're simply curious about what will happen next, almost like a game, sincerely so. In this case, you need to be here. In fact, you really need to develop a deep sense of inner honesty. Many people often try to hide and disguise their true desires, much like a camouflage net thrown over fear. And underneath those desires is fear. And yet people fail to fully recognize or realize that what they are feeling is actually fear. That's what true inner honesty is. In fact, the practice of inner honesty is one of the most powerful practices in the world. Just sit down and soberly admit to yourself what you like and what you don't like, no matter how painful it might be, as they say, no matter how it might look to your mind. In fact, it's from the practice of inner honesty that real development begins. A deeper, more honest, more sincere relationship with yourself. And in that, there's no more running away.
By the way, I'm just thinking right now that with the guidance of your higher self, if you actually have this, let's say, incredible tool available to you, If you have the ability, if you know how to enter that level of awareness, I can look and see what is harmonious for me and what isn't, whether certain supplements are harmonious for me or not, or things like cosmetic surgeries and other related treatments.
Yes, of course, of course. And you need to, not just can, but need to respond. You must. It's very practical. That's why I always tell everyone, guys, in the 5th month, in the 6th, when we're working specifically on answering questions, in the 4th month, learn to answer questions, always, constantly, any questions. The more often you answer and keep a journal of coincidences when things really start to match up for you, 80%, 90%, then that means you really are moving in the right direction. And there are always some guys who want to ask me, there are always people who want to ask me about this topic, like how do you know if it's your higher self and not some kind of connection? How can you tell it's your higher self and not some entity? Read my blog, it's all explained there in detail. Or better yet, come and visit the school for the first 2 months. After the first month, you won't have any questions left on this topic whatsoever.
Yes, that's because contact with your higher self is very practical. It is not merely a matter of philosophy, or like you are just discovering details about your past lives or something. It is quite simply a practical tool for life, really.
My dear friends, for 10 years now, I've been teaching a course on the higher self for a Russian-speaking audience. During this time, about 4,000 to 4,500 people have passed through my school. I've been working on this topic for 20 years. Today, my school is one of the largest and most famous specialized schools for connecting with the higher self in the Russian-speaking world. And then I suddenly realized that it is finally time to reach out to the masses, so to speak. Yes, to the much wider world and to the incredibly vast expanse of the entire global internet. All the professional skills I have carefully developed, all the dedicated practices I have refined, and all the quick entries, thorough checks, and rigorous exams I have built over the last 10 years are now being brought to a truly global level. I now invite you to join a brand new, specially discounted group for the comprehensive Return to the True Self course, now available in English for students everywhere. 6 months of work on stopping the internal dialogue, working with blocks, and focusing on actually accessing the higher self. Answering both simple and complex questions regarding purpose, contact with God, and with the planet. Answering basically any questions on any topic, including work, relationships, and anything at all. Manifesting desires through the higher self, viewing past lives through the higher self, and everything that didn't fit into the first 5 months in a separate 6th one. And after that, you'll have the opportunity to join the alumni club, as well as the chance to continue your studies at the 2nd level of the school. The price for the discounted groups is discounted. You can find all the information about this below at the link under this video.